Welcome to Trekking Through Trek. On this channel, I normally, if I'm not talking about movies or other marathons, I'm talking about Doctor Who. That's the reason I'm wearing this shirt at the moment. But I'm deciding to go through a whole other science fiction franchise of which I am a major fan of. Star Trek is a long-running franchise that has been going on all the way since the 60s. Started by Gene Roddenberry, it's been a franchise that has thankfully expanded into a multitude of media and has spanned a multitude of generations. It's a series that I was introduced to by my mom, and she watched it with her dad when she was much younger, which is very interesting, right? It has spanned multiple generations of people. Friends of mine that like Star Trek will be sharing it with their kids when they have them if they're not doing it right now, and that's very fun. It's something that I'm pretty sure will continue on regardless of quality of the shows through many generations, and I'm deciding to watch every single one of them, starting all the way with TOS. Now, while I think it'll be very fun to watch all of them in like timeline order, and I certainly have thought about that, and one day I'll do that marathon again, ultimately, rewatching all of them is something I did semi-recently. Now, of course, it's really when Section 31 came out and I hated it so much that I decided I was going to rewatch the entirety of the show to figure out if anything was worse than it. And the answer, oddly, was yes, by the way, but like a few things. So, but we'll eventually get to what those may be, and if anything got even close. But more importantly, a celebration of the Star Trek franchise and why I really enjoy it as much as I do. With that, let's get a little bit of background for Star Trek and how it began. Gene Roddenberry, born in El Paso, Texas in 1921 to Carolyn Glenn Roddenberry and Eugene Edward Roddenberry, his father was a World War I veteran and police officer who he described as a, quote, bigoted Texan. Still, he had a begrudging respect for his father, as he believed in some way that his father had some sort of view of the future and possibly going into space. He learned of that when two elderly ladies wrote him from Jacksonville, and that they knew that one day he'd get to greats in his talks about sci-fi, and they apparently were talking about his dad. In spite of this, Rod Roddenberry, Gene's son, would later recall in the fact that his father had told him about their grandfather apparently going around the neighborhood and apologizing for Gene's own creations and how strange they were. Gene's mother, on the other hand, was a devout Baptist and dragged the young Roddenberry siblings to church every single Sunday. It resulted in Gene Roddenberry being very outspoken about religion and his lack of belief in it, which, more power on you, but it both sort of began the good and bad of who Gene Roddenberry is. Lending him a copy of Astounding Stories in high school, Roddenberry's fascination of science fiction began at a very young age. When he grew up, he studied 3 years of policemanship, and then started an interest in aeronautical engineering and qualified for a pilot's license. During World War II, he was part of the United States Army Air Force right when it started to be a thing, and flew 89 missions and sorties. Despite having a few accidents, of which are notable, he did continue to fly, eventually joining Pan American World Airways as a commercial pilot. After suffering another accident, 3 of his life, he left his flying career behind, but decided to become a police officer. It's here that he became the liaison from the police offices of the Los Angeles Police Department and the writers of certain shows like Dragnet. It's here he got his first foray into writing, and he was able to really put his passion of writing and sci-fi as he began coming up with more and more ideas. It was during this time when he eventually married his first wife, Eileen Anita Rexroth, on the 20th of June, 1942. A relationship that would be strained for various reasons, of which I believe we'll get to eventually. Having small writing jobs, he eventually would be able to put his ideas to good use, as he would then try to sell his ideas to various studios. Landing a deal with Screen Gems, which guaranteed $100,000, he began to establish a production company, the Norway Corporation. It was there he handled his business with a certain important attorney, Leonard Maeslish, who we will talk about when he eventually becomes very important to later shows, producing a few television shows, mostly The Lieutenant, where he would meet several stars, of which will become important for the later Star Trek. As The Lieutenant ended, he ultimately wrote up the whole series proposal, just known as Star Trek Is. In March 1964, he proposed the idea to MGM. Though the studio was initially enthusiastic, they denied the idea, so they brought it to Desilu Productions. Desilu Productions, the company which of course was started by I Love Lucy herself, and because the Lucy show was the only thing that they were making at the time, they sure were desperate. They took it to CBS, and trying to sell it like it was, quote, wagon train, but in space, it was able to get its first pilot. Its first pilot would be ultimately recognized as interesting, but would be rejected, and despite that, a second pilot would come about and would be much more successful. The more details on that later on. Though at first interested, ultimately CBS had to pass on it, and it would be NBC that would take up the strange sci-fi series after its second pilot. With that, that would begin the era of the original series, and more info about where TOS would go, how it would be canceled, and eventually attempted to be brought back, for it to eventually be brought back begrudgingly by the producers, for it to begin a major success in the eventual movie franchise and TNG to eventually grow into the franchise that's a big multimedia mastery that is Star Trek we will get into over our many videos in this series. I, as a major Star Trek and sci-fi fan in general, am very happy to go over my opinions of each of them and hopefully make a few unfunny jokes along the way. I hope I can share how I feel about this franchise in a well enough way that it makes a lot of sense, but just note, though I respect a lot of the people who make this show, I'm probably going to make fun of a few of them, especially Gene Roddenberry. Again, I do understand his vision, and I do understand people's respect towards it, but just know Gene Roddenberry's vision, though is a nice one of a utopian future, is not perfect, and we will certainly get to why, about how he was involved with the show and the ups and downs of all of what he and other people in the production companies have done for this show and where it eventually will lead till today. So I promise you, though, even if I may joke about certain people, I have a lot of respect for a majority of people who work for this franchise. So I hope as a fan you could ultimately understand that all of this is in good fun and that it is always the best way to understand and enjoy a franchise is to look through both its goods and see the bads within them, and the bads and see the good within them, and that nothing should be ever off limits. So with that, I hope you follow me through this journey that we'll start doing very, very soon as I go through trekking through Star Trek.